Karen slammed her fist on the breakfast bar, rattling the porcelain mugs. He wouldn't dare. Her husband, Ed, lowered his newspaper, a flicker of annoyance crossing his otherwise placid face. Dare what, Karen? And please, stop banging on the furniture. That, barbarian next door. Karen sputtered, pointing a manicured finger towards the picture window overlooking their meticulously manicured lawn. He's building something. It's huge, Ed, and hideous. Ed sighed, pushing his reading glasses further up his nose. He knew that tone. It was the Karen is about to declare war on the neighborhood tone. He peeked over his newspaper. His jaw dropped. 2 houses down, their new neighbor, a burly man with a lumberjack beard and a penchant for wearing only camouflage cargo shorts, was operating a small crane. It was hoisting a massive, gnarled log, easily the size of a telephone pole, into the air. But that wasn't the worst part. The log was being positioned directly across their neighbor's driveway. Harold and Agnes's driveway, the elderly couple who always walked 2 abreast and drove 5 miles under the speed limit. Ed had to hand it to the camo-clad giant. It was a strategically brilliant, if wildly aggressive, move. He's blocking their driveway, Ed exclaimed, shocked out of his usual morning stupor. Their driveway? Karen scoffed. Ed, open your eyes. That log will block our entire street. This is a disaster. I'm calling the HOA this instant. This atrocity ends now. Karen grabbed her phone, a gleam of righteous fury in her eye. Ed, meanwhile, stared at the log, a sense of morbid curiosity creeping in. He wasn't sure what was more entertaining, the new neighbor's audacious power play or the volcanic eruption that was about to be Karen versus the HOA. Either way, it looked like their quiet cul-de-sac was about to get a whole lot more interesting. Karen jabbed at her phone, her voice rising in pitch with each unanswered ring of the HOA president's number. Pick up, Margaret, you useless. Odd. She slammed her phone down on the counter, momentarily forgetting her carefully cultivated air of suburban grace. Voicemail. As if HOA complaints can wait for a callback. Ed, torn between amusement and apprehension, cautiously approached the window. The camo-clad neighbor, seemingly oblivious to the mounting chaos he was causing, was attaching a heavy-duty chain to the log. He's chaining it to their mailbox. Ed sputtered, who does that? Karen, momentarily distracted from her righteous fury, peered out the window. He's not chaining it to their mailbox, Ed, she said, her voice laced with a mix of disgust and grudging admiration. That's a custom-made, wrought iron, medieval-style mailbox. With their initials, H and A, intertwined. See, he's got talent. Why couldn't he have used that talent for something? Well, normal. Ed stared at the log, now firmly secured across the elderly couple's driveway. It was an impressive piece of lumber, he had to admit, with its rough-hewn bark and imposing girth. A small, hand-painted wooden sign hung from the chain. PRKNG for visitors only. Well, there's our problem, Ed said, a slow smile spreading across his face. Harold and Agnes never have visitors. They haven't left that house in 5 years except for doctor's appointments and the early bird buffet at Shoney's on Tuesdays. Karen missed the humor. This isn't a joke, Ed. This is a direct assault on our property values. And think about the safety hazard. What if there's an emergency? What if the ambulance needs to get through? Just then, a beat-up sit-in turned onto their sleepy cul-de-sac, its horn blaring angrily. Agnes, her face a mask of bewildered terror, gripped the steering wheel as she inched the car closer to the log, her progress halted by the unexpected obstacle. Karen, her face a triumphant mask of vindication, grabbed her phone again. The cavalry has arrived. Margaret better pick up this time. Margaret, the HOA president and reigning queen of passive-aggressive welcome baskets, answered on the third ring, her voice sickeningly sweet. Karen, darling, how lovely to hear from you. I trust everything is simply peachy in our little slice of paradise. Karen, ignoring the thinly veiled sarcasm, launched into a breathless account of the unfolding crisis. Margaret, you wouldn't believe it. That asterisk lumberjack asterisk next door just barricaded the street with a log. It's massive. And he chained it to a asterisk medieval torture device asterisk disguised as a mailbox. Silence. Then, a muffled snort from the other end of the line. Margaret, are you laughing? This is serious. Agnes is trapped in her car. This constitutes a clear violation of HOA Bylaw 37B, subsection 4, paragraph C. No resident shall erect, construct, or otherwise install any structure, fixture, or landscaping element that impedes the safe and unobstructed passage of vehicular or pedestrian traffic within the boundaries of the Pleasant Pines community. Karen paused, momentarily breathless from her impressive, if slightly embellished, recitation of HOA law. She imagined Margaret, phone practically glued to her ear, frantically flipping through the pages of the community rulebook. Well, Karen, Margaret finally drawled, her voice dripping with a syrupy sweetness that would make honey taste bitter. You do make a compelling point. But as you know, we must follow proper procedure. I'll need to formally review the complaint, consult with the board, and schedule a site visit. A site visit. Margaret, Agnes is practically being held hostage by a log. We need action, not a committee meeting. All duly noted, Karen, Margaret said, a hint of steel creeping into her voice. I'll see what I can do. In the meantime, I suggest a soothing chamomile tea and perhaps a relaxing foot soak. These things take time, dear. And with a click, Karen was left listening to the dial tone, a rising sense of dread washing over her. Margaret's infuriating calm could only mean one thing. The HOA was powerless. And if the HOA couldn't handle this, what hope did they have? Karen snapped her phone shut, a surge of pure, unadulterated rage coursing through her. That woman is useless, she hissed, her voice tight with frustration. A soothing chamomile tea. As if a cup of weeds can fix this disaster. Ed, who had witnessed Karen's HOA-related meltdowns before, decided it was time for a strategic retreat. Well, I'm sure Margaret is on top of it, he mumbled, edging towards the back door. I'm going to, check on the sprinklers. He beat a hasty retreat before Karen could unleash the full force of her fury. Left alone with her mounting anxiety, Karen paced back and forth in front of the window, her gaze fixed on the log. Agnes remained trapped in her car, her face a pale blur against the windshield. The camo-clad neighbor was nowhere in sight. Then, an idea struck Karen. A brilliant, audacious, slightly unhinged idea. If the HOA wouldn't take action, she would. She would fight fire with fire, obstruction with, well, an even bigger obstruction. She grabbed her phone and dialed a number, a mischievous glint in her eye. Hello, is this Big Bob's Landscaping Emporium? I need to speak to someone about a special project. Let's just say it involves water features. A asterisk of water features. 2 hours later, a convoy of landscaping trucks rumbled onto their quiet cul-de-sac, kicking up dust and shattering the afternoon tranquility. Karen, a woman possessed, directed the bewildered workers with military precision. The pond liner goes asterisk there asterisk. No, the asterisk deep asterisk end needs to be closer to the street. And make sure you leave enough room for the drawbridge. Ed, lured back inside by the commotion, stopped dead in his tracks, his eyes widening in disbelief. His wife, standing triumphantly amidst a scene of utter landscaping chaos, was overseeing the construction of a moat. A moat filled with murky, green water and stocked with what looked suspiciously like several dozen largemouth bass. "Karen," he said, his voice a strangled whisper, "what in the world have you done?" Karen, her hands on her hips, surveyed her watery masterpiece with a satisfied smirk. "What does it look like I've done, Ed?" she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I'm protecting our property values. Besides," she added, tilting her head towards Agnes, who was now frantically calling someone on her cell phone, "it appears to be a rather effective deterrent against unwanted visitors." Ed stared at the moat, his mind struggling to grasp the sheer audacity of his wife's actions. It was madness. Pure, unadulterated, HOA infuriating madness. And yet, a small, rebellious part of him had to admit it was kind of impressive. But, the drawbridge," he stammered, pointing to the large wooden structure lying haphazardly across the newly dug ditch. "Ah, yes," Karen said, her eyes gleaming with manic energy. "That's arriving tomorrow. Along with the security cameras and the motion-activated floodlights. We can't be too careful, you know. This neighborhood is going to the dogs." Just then, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows screeched to a halt in front of the log barricade. A tall, imposing woman with a severe blonde bob and a matching pantsuit emerged from the vehicle. It was Margaret, the HOA president, and she did not look happy. "Karen." Margaret's voice, usually as smooth and sweet as a glass of sweet tea, was now sharp enough to cut diamonds. "What, pray tell, is the meaning of this abomination asterisk?" Karen, unfazed by Margaret's fury, gracefully crossed her arms over her chest. "This, Margaret dear," she said, gesturing towards the moat with a flourish, "is what happens when the HOA fails to enforce its own bylaws. Consider it a friendly reminder that in Pleasant Pines, we take our property values very seriously." Margaret's eyes narrowed, her lips pressed into a thin white line. The battle had begun. Margaret, momentarily speechless at the sheer audacity of Karen's landscaping coup, stood rooted to the spot, her carefully sculpted eyebrows furrowed in a mixture of anger and begrudging respect. She had dealt with her fair share of HOA scofflaws before. People who left their trash cans out a minute past curfew, planted petunias that clashed with the community color palette, and, on one memorable occasion, tried to sneak in a pot-bellied pig disguised as an emotional support animal. But this was a whole new level of suburban warfare. Karen, it seemed, had officially raised the white flag and replaced it with a custom-made wrought iron banner that read, "Calm at me, HOA." "Karen," Margaret said, her voice dangerously calm, "do you realize the ramifications of your actions? This is a blatant violation of at least a dozen bylaws." "Oh, I'm sure you'll find a violation somewhere," Karen retorted, not in the least bit intimidated. She casually plucked a stray weed from her perfectly manicured lawn. "But while you're busy researching obscure landscaping regulations, perhaps you could address the original violation, the one involving a giant log and a pair of senior citizens trapped in their driveway." She gestured towards Agnes, who was still huddled in her car, observing the unfolding drama with a mixture of horror and morbid fascination. Margaret, realizing she was quickly losing control of the situation, took a deep breath and pulled out her trump card. "Karen, I'm placing a stop work order on this water feature *. She practically spat out the words water feature as if they were poison. "And unless you want to be slapped with a hefty fine and mandatory attendance at the next HOA landscaping seminar, believe me, it's excruciating *. I suggest you have this monstrosity filled in immediately." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Karen's face, but she quickly recovered her composure. "We'll see about that, Margaret," she said, a steely glint in her eye. "We'll just see about that." Turning her back on the fuming HOA president, Karen strode towards the moat, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Just visible in the distance, A plume of dust announced the arrival of the drawbridge. The game was on. The arrival of the flat truck carrying the custom-built drawbridge was an event worthy of a medieval battle reenactment. Kids stopped playing basketball. Parents abandoned their grills, and even Agnes, momentarily forgetting her vehicular confinement, craned her neck for a better view. The neighborhood had officially become a spectator sport, and Karen was the conductor of this suburban symphony of chaos. Two burly men, sweating under the weight of the massive oak beams, carefully maneuvered the drawbridge into place, its heavy chains clinking ominously. Ed, torn between admiration and terror, watched from the sidelines, a single thought echoing in his mind. Asterisk, she's actually doing this. She's actually building a moat and drawbridge asterisk. Karen, a general surveying her troops, directed the workers with a combination of hand gestures and barked commands. No, no, the other way. It needs to clear the petunias. The petunias, ironically, were a vibrant shade of pink that directly violated the HOA-approved color palette. But Margaret seemed to have overlooked that minor transgression in light of the more substantial landscaping infraction at hand. With a groan of ancient wood and the clang of metal on metal, the drawbridge locked into place, spanning the murky depths of the moat with an air of defiant permanence. Karen, her masterpiece complete, stepped back to admire her handiwork, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "Well, Margaret," she said, her voice dripping with sugary venom, "what do you think? A vast improvement over the Welcome to Pleasant Pines sign, wouldn't you say?" Margaret, however, refused to be baited. She stood ramrod straight, her face an impassive mask, her eyes narrowed behind her designer sunglasses. She had a plan, Karen could tell, and it wasn't going to involve chamomile tea and a relaxing foot soak. "You've made your point, Karen," Margaret said, her voice deceptively calm. "But this isn't over. Not by a long shot." And with that ominous pronouncement, she turned on her heel and marched back to her SUV, leaving Karen standing on the wrong side of the moat, a strange mix of victory and apprehension swirling within her. The following days were a bizarre mix of medieval siege and suburban standoff. Karen, embracing her new role as defender of the realm, or at least her corner of Pleasant Pines, purchased a vintage suit of armor from a Renaissance fair enthusiast online. It wasn't exactly functional. She nearly passed out from heat exhaustion the first time she tried to wear the full ensemble. But it looked impressive mounted on a stand on the front lawn, a silent guardian overlooking her watery domain. Margaret, true to her word, went on the offensive. Official HOA violation notices, each one outlining a new and increasingly creative infraction, arrived daily. Unsanctioned water feature. Unpermitted wildlife habitat. Apparently, the bass qualified. And most bafflingly, inappropriate display of historical artifacts. Karen countered with a series of increasingly sarcastic appeals, citing obscure HOA bylaws and quoting passages from her newly purchased copy of The Art of War. Ed, meanwhile, had become an unlikely celebrity. Neighbors, initially horrified by the moat, now stopped by with lawn chairs and coolers, eager to witness the escalating conflict between their resident HOA revel and the formidable Margaret. Then, just when the stalemate seemed destined to last until the next ice age, the tide turned. Harold and Agnes, liberated from their log-enforced confinement by a team of burly men hired by an anonymous benefactor, rumored to be a disgruntled resident who had battled Margaret over the placement of his garden gnome, emerged from their home. Agnes, surprisingly spry for someone who had allegedly spent the past week held hostage by a log, marched straight over to the moat, a twinkle in her eye. "Well, Karen," she said, her voice surprisingly strong, "you've certainly livened things up around here. I haven't seen this much excitement since they filmed that episode of Murder She Wrote down the street." She paused, a mischievous grin spreading across her face. "You know, that Margaret woman has been a thorn in my side for years. Remember that time She tried to have my prize-winning zucchini disqualified from the community garden competition. Said it was unnaturally large. Karen, sensing an unexpected ally, grinned back. I have a feeling, Agnes, this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the now infamous moat, Karen and Agnes, flanked by Ed and a growing contingent of rebellious neighbors, raised their glasses in a toast. The battle for Pleasant Pines was far from over. But one thing was clear. Karen, the HOA slayer, had struck her first blow. And it had been glorious.